King of K-pop is a huge title. I don't think it necessarily belongs to one K-pop idol. I think there is a lot of K-pop idols out there who have paved ways and definitely earned that title as well. Taemin fully deserves this title and has been transformational to K-pop in his own way. Hi, welcome to the Lunapod, where we talk all things K-pop. I'm Brikell.
And I'm Brooke, and today we'll be talking about Brikell's old bias, who is
Lee Taemin. I am simultaneously both so ecstatic and terrified to film this. So, yay, another ult episode. If you haven't checked out Brooke's ult episode about Min Yoongi, definitely go check that out. It's fantastic. Absolutely adore that man.
So I was stressing out, now it's your turn.
Let's just jump right into it because I honestly don't know how to start well with Taemin, to be completely honest. I spent so long putting this episode together.
You did.
I have had the past week, I think I've only slept maybe, I didn't sleep last night. I was finishing this. I didn't sleep 2 nights ago because I was working on this. So it's been a lot of work. But anyway, Taemin is not only titled as the dance king of K-pop, but he also has other very heavy titles in K-pop, such as a K-pop powerhouse or a megastar. And I mean, that proves he's made an impact when it comes to K-pop. So who is Taemin? I feel like he has a lot of different names or nicknames, including the Michael Jackson of K-pop, the Forever Maknae, the Dancing Machine, Idol's Idol. My personal favorite is when he goes by Taemini. I think it's adorable. But we will get into more about those nicknames in just a bit, and a lot more about him. That all wraps up the reason of why I love Taemin more than I can possibly explain. But for now, let's start with the absolute basics if you don't know who Taemin is. I said I was nervous earlier. I am also so excited I could sob, which, speaking of sobbing, I think I need to talk about the first time I ever heard of Taemin. So if you haven't checked out our K-pop tag episode, it's our very first episode, and I also explained in this that Taemin was one of my very first introductions to K-pop in general.
A great introduction.
Yes, thank you. This is all you. Take the credit.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
I remember you showed me the Advice music video, and I immediately fell in love with him.
Yeah.
Advice was a sound and a look and a performance. It was everything I wanted in music that I had never seen before. And it was a turning point for me. I remember that last scene of Taemin played, and I knew K-pop was about to be my next big obsession.
Because I think I had shown you maybe 1 or 2 other music videos before
Stray
that.
Kids and something, and then
and I was
Taemin.
you want something good that just came out? This.
Yes. Which I'm actually curious, what was your first experience with Taemin?
I was in high school, and my friend was very into K-pop, and her ult was Taemin as well.
Aww.
And she had posters of him from Press Your Number era. It was really sweet. And I remember she had us watch that music video and Drip Drop. That was really good. And I really enjoyed his music and loved it. But during that time, I just didn't dive into K-pop. But even after her being my friend, I still had certain K-pop songs she exposed me to on a playlist, and I remember 2 or 3 Taemin songs were on there.
That is so cute. He pops up everywhere. I'm
he does.
You know of Taemin even if you don't know of Taemin. I remember I was replaying that music video all the time. My roommate at the time was into K-pop, but I was still, again, very new to K-pop. I didn't even really know what it was yet at all. But I remember showing her Taemin's Advice music video. I'm like, look, I don't know what K-pop is, but this is Taemin, and oh my god, look at him. I honestly had no idea what I was in for when I decided to become obsessed with Taemin, because Taemin is a life ult.
I think so. That makes sense. That's a good title for it.
It is. And I noticed this because I realized people who say that they ult Taemin often say, I've ulted Taemin for 14 years. I've ulted Taemin for 10 years. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay, so this is for life.
He's a for lifer.
He is. Taemin was born July 18th, 1993, and he is a 3-generational idol, which is wild to me. He is a member of SHINee since 2008, and he debuted with SHINee when he was 14 years old, which blows my mind every single time I hear it. 14
It's crazy, because I feel a lot of idols now are very young when debuting, but Back then, I mean,
Yeah.
again, like, maybe I can check, but, like, I swear back then, like, people that young weren't debuting. I don't know, maybe they
No.
were, but it's still even to now, like, being used to a lot of, like, younger idols debuting, it's still a shock when you hear it.
Yeah, I'm like 14. I wasn't.
What was I doing?
I was riding my scooter. I was not caring about life at all. I was 14. I was a kid. Like, that's just crazy. And again, this is 2008. So he's been an idol for 15 years, which means he has now been an idol for more than half of his life. He's been an idol
crazy.
longer. It just blows my mind.
And including, like, trainee days with that, too, you know?
Exactly.
Like, that's a whole other thing.
Yes, which he's with SM, that's the company that he's for. And he started training in 2005, and he trained for 3 years. He was literally 11 or 12 years old when he started training. What? I was shocked at the 14. Are you kidding me? 11?
11?
I don't get it. Like, I have a younger brother
What was I
who's that
doing?
age.
What year is that? 2008.
I was
I
8
was
years old.
I was a little Joe Bro girl. Like, I was in the Jonas Brothers.
I don't
And just,
think-
like, chilling.
I didn't even have an iPod at that point in
Freaking
time, I
out
don't
over,
think.
like, J14 magazines. Like, you know, like, I don't know. Like, that's
He was
insane.
in a company training at that age. Like, what? And he ended up joining SM through an open weekend audition casting and was personally handpicked by the founder of SM, Lee Taemin himself.
That's
like, literally.
sick.
Yeah, it's incredible. So that was kind of his, like, overall, like, with SHINee. Debuting in 2008 means that's a second generational K-pop group, right? And then you have him debuting as a soloist in 2014, which is third generation K-pop. He was actually the first soloist of SHINee. He was actually SM's first ever soloist from a fixed group, like an active fixed group. So just already from the beginning being
Like
the start,
yeah.
the first. Right before his solo debut, SM actually officially gave him the title Ace of SM. He was 20 years old at the time, and I think that just proves that this
cute.
company absolutely adores him. Yeah, he's been given a lot of leeway and, like, control over his own creativity and his artistry, to the point where he's able to, like, choose his own tracks. He chooses his own music video directors, concepts. He even personally goes to the homes of these music video and creative directors and, like, the stylists. Like, he's, like, waltzing into their household and he's like, you know what, let me edit this music video. Let me write this lyric and make this choreo. Like, I don't know how else to explain how much he is loved by SM than this. Lee Taemin once said that anyone could be successful if they worked as hard as Taemin did. Last but not least, Taemin also debuted with Super M in 2019, which is a fourth generation K-pop group, which kind of wraps up. He's a 3-generational idol. He's debuted in 3 different generations.
Which is crazy.
It's wild. Super M is basically what's called a super group, but with all of his groups that he's been in and his debuts, they're like Super M and SHINee will have their own spotlight episodes in the future. I want to focus more on his solo career and who Taemin is as a person, because I feel like that encompasses what I love about him so much. Anyway, when I was putting together this episode, I really had to analyze Taemin and I had to analyze myself.
LOL.
Yeah, for real. Because like I kind of stated earlier, I ulted Taemin before I even knew what an ult was. I don't think I even knew what a bias was at that point.
At that point, no.
No, I was just immediately drawn to him. And, like, I think that is sometimes how an ult works. You can't exactly pinpoint why they're your ult, but something inside you is just like, yeah, that's the person.
And a lot of times, like, people are like, oh, you don't choose your ult, they choose you, kind of thing. So I love that.
Yeah, that is literally the situation. I've also heard it said before that your ult bias is a reflection of yourself, but it can also be who we want to be, and sometimes like who we're afraid to be. So it's like someone that we relate to, but also admire.
Just kind of like a version of yourself, yeah.
Yeah. So over the past few weeks, I have done some very deep diving into him and trying to find out why I'm so drawn to him. I've learned a lot about myself and my subconscious self. I will be getting into that more. It's a lot. I'm hoping by the end of this episode it all comes full circle and makes sense, but you know, we'll see. So let's talk a little bit more about Taemin and his personality. Kind of like I stated earlier, I have never seen a more loved idol, not only by his company, but by other companies, other idols, and fans from all over. One of the nicknames that I talked about very briefly earlier was the Forever Maknae. He is extremely adored by everyone in the industry. This is seniors to him, juniors, peers, even absolute strangers who are like immediately calling him nicknames and, you know, treating him as this maknae just because they love him and his aura. And so maknae is a very like endearing term for them anyway, like over in Korea. And so just being called the forever maknae, like that fits him so well. Another good example of how he is loved so much is his influence in the K-pop industry. And I have heard it said before that literally nobody is doing it like Taemin. Like, he's been in this industry for over a decade, and he still remains one of the most relevant idols in the industry.
That's true.
Yeah, this impact that he's had has literally gave him the nickname Idol's Idol, which Teen Vogue even put it as like the ultimate idol's idol. He was the #1 cited role model for K-pop idols, female and male, and literally has this nickname called Taemdrol. Taemdrol, I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, but it's literally meaning like Taemin is a role model. So some noticeable names that look up to Taemin or have considered him one of their idols is Taehyun from TXT, Haechin, Jino, Jisung, and Ten from NCT, Songhwa from ATEEZ, Kihyun from Monsta X, Nikki in Hypen, Channy from SF9, Rocky from Astro, Byungchan from Victon, Jimin from BTS, Jonghan from 17, Chaeyeon from IZ*ONE, Chungha, Boa, Rain, Eric Nam, John Somi, and multiple idols from Gravity, Winner, WeEye, Teen Top, Snooper, etc., etc., etc. Chances are, even if Taemin is not your favorite idol, he's probably your favorite idol's favorite idol.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Like how you're listing all those off, like, and we always go through the K profiles. I see his name all the time.
Yeah, same. Now, talking a little bit more about his impact on the K-pop industry, Taemin has this feeling of responsibility for K-pop's future, which I'm like, that is such a big role to take on. But he's like openly spoken about this, and he's like thought about how K-pop is not only trending now, but like he wants to make it a genre that will stay around forever. And he's like, not only me, but all of my peers, like everyone who's in K-pop needs to be coming up with different and new stuff. And I feel like this is a good example of like Taemin always seems to be ahead of the curve. He pioneers concepts that other groups are later like, ooh, yeah, that's cool, like let's do that. But he starts it, and I just think that's really cool. Like, not only is he admired by that, but he trend sets. He's even gone so far to create his own brand of K-pop. He calls it Taemin Pop, which is very cute. But critics have even said that he has gone beyond K-pop, like even transcended in a way. All in all, I think, honestly, he is one of the critics' favorite idols as well. And some nicknames that have been given to him by, like, the Korean public and mainstream media. From Dreammaker Entertainment, they've called him the best solo male artist in history, the king of K-pop. He's also been known as a religion, a god, and a country, which I found very humorous but accurate. V-Live has called him the god of K-pop, and Mnet has called him performance king, the one and only dancing king, etc. Just, again, a lot of really big titles. Now let's start getting into a little bit more of why I specifically love Taemin so much, and I think the perfect place to start is his music, obviously. There is something about Taemin's music that has the most emotionally deep feeling to it, and I have always loved the sound of music more than I've necessarily liked lyrics. I can appreciate lyrics, of course, but like music being in another language when I was first getting into K-pop, that meant nothing to me.
Not a problem.
Not at all. I'm like, yeah, I'm here for the sounds, I'm here for the vibes. But I think Taemin actually put this really interestingly. He wasn't talking about music, but what he says is still relevant. He said, when I watch a movie, I'm not inspired by the movie itself, but the feelings I have as I'm watching it. That's literally exactly how I feel about music.
Yeah.
It's the feelings that I get from it. I think more people feel this way than they originally think, because music is a very powerful thing. I mean, there's been a lot of like controversy and talk even about subliminals, you know, being used in music, and like people being worried about it for kids and whatever. You know, music is just extremely powerful to human beings, and like I kind of said before, Taemin's music is just so emotional and it's so deep. Like I just immediately feel it so deeply. I don't know what he's saying, but I feel it, and everything that man sings, it's just coming straight from his soul. Like I feel like you hear his songs and he's just like singing from such a depth of emotion.
That's the thing, like people always really concerned about a language barrier. That's not an issue. You can still get that emotion connection and get that connection even without like knowing the translation.
Exactly. And I feel like there's a lot of groups that like really talk about that, of they're like, you're still getting the message even though you don't necessarily understand the lyrics right away.
And I remember that, like, kind of like not related to him, but like there was from like a 17, I think it was like a live stream or something, a fan like said to them like, I don't understand you but I love you, and like they even like made that into a song.
That's
and so I'm like,
cute.
that's very relevant with like all of this. Like, we don't need to understand you, we still love you, we still like
I'm
connect
what
with
you're
you
saying.
like, yes.
Yeah. You know, let's go a little bit more into his music career specifically. He's been said to have one of the most intriguing and established solo careers in Korean K-pop music. His sound is usually more of like R&B, pop, but it's like sometimes influenced by rock and hip hop and trap and electro, and usually a bit darker than what he does with SHINee and more sensual, which we'll get more into later. But something that I really want to point out is that when he first debuted with SHINee, he had 0 vocal lines. He was even labeled as tone deaf at his debut, and from that point, he's now a main vocalist, and he's a top solo artist with an extremely recognizable and versatile voice.
Yeah, he has a very specific tone of voice, like you can always know it's him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm like, just that's an amazing growth. Like, he literally went from he's not a singer to now that is literally him. And lyrically, he has concepts that are talking about love and lust and identity and philosophy and faith, and a lot of it is choreography based. He also includes biblical references, which is very interesting. But one thing I want to know, it's kind of random, but there was a point in time where he self-composed, wrote, and choreographed a repackaged title called Day and Night in 3 days because SM was going to make him reuse an old Japan to Korean version track, and he was like, no, we need something new. I'm not doing that. And so literally within 3 days, he put together this entire repackaged like deal. That's wild to me. And as much as I love his music so much, I think Taemin is mostly known for his dance. Another kind of random little fact, if you haven't seen it already, he actually did a showdown with Jimin from BTS. And this was kind of an interesting thing because it got some backlash at first because they looked to be weren't in sync. And I think this is just the fact that they have 2 very different dance styles.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Jimin is very fluid in his movements and Taemin is very precise and exact. And so like they both dance beautifully and you like watch it separately and you're like, yeah, that's perfect. And I'm like, honestly, it doesn't even really matter if they look good together.
I mean, it's a showdown. It's like them going up against each other with their different, like they're both highly known for their like dancing skills. So I mean, it makes sense for it to be different, but still like cohesive in the sense of they have different styles.
Exactly. And like overall, they're really good friends and they were enjoying being on stage together and it's iconic and that's what matters. Now, another interesting note is that Taemin was the very first K-pop artist to ever perform on a runway at a fashion show for a comeback.
That is so funny.
It was wild to me. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but for his move comeback, it was performed on a runway. Taemin first started his interest in dance from his older brother, which I just find very endearing. Because again, you think little 11-year-old Taemin dancing, and I'm like, that's so cute. He is so well known in dance that he's actually gotten the nickname the Dancing Machine because he is known as one of the industry's best dancers. It was actually unanimously voted #1 between old and new K-pop stands. And honestly, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. If you're talking about dancing in K-pop, Taemin is usually brought up somehow. He is known as a leading figure in popularizing like contemporary dance, but something I was mind blown about is that he was never even classically trained for contemporary dance. Yet he's like a leader
and like
in
known
this.
for that.
Yeah, I'm like, what? I don't understand. Honestly, that just proves how absolutely incredible he is in dance in general. But since his solo debut, his team of dancers have always had to be the top of the game. And so in order for it to not look messy, he has to have like really good dancers with him. And almost always his dancing team consists of at least 3 of the actual choreographers, which is wild to me. And the choreographers have mentioned how they like feel challenged when they're working with him, which is really cool. And he's also received a lot of high praise from his seniors who have worked with him. And something that was really cool is he was actually evaluated by a machine program. And the machine found that he was the #1 most consistent performer among like numerous male idols who were scanned. So I'm like, that's cool. Literally, technically, he is like very consistent in his performance. I think I need to explain a little bit more of why like his dancing means so much to me, because like if we were just talking about Taemin, like obviously that's a big part of who he is and stuff, but I think it goes a little bit deeper as well for me personally. I realized recently that a lot of the K-pop idols that I love or bias are very strong dancers, and it like didn't click for me because I never danced. I've never been a dancer. I can't dance at all. At all. I've never known how to move my body. But I like look back and I remember in elementary school I always had this big book of ballet checked out. I loved dance. I loved the idea of it. I thought it was so beautiful. And I had this like ballet slippers from Ballet West. Like it wasn't ones to wear. It was just like show, but I loved them. I adored them. And so I loved dance, just not dancing necessarily. Yes. And I remember in college, for one of my assignments, I had to go to this dance competition show. And I remember not thinking much about it. I love shows. So I was like, yeah, whatever, you know, credit for the class. And I remember they started dancing up there and I was just absolutely captivated for like the 3 hours that this performance went on. And I was like, wow, I get it. Like the artistry in here, and I'm an artist myself. So I think it just makes my art brain very happy. And like, that style of art is so beautiful. So that was something I recently figured out about myself because I never really understood that. Jumping back to Taemin more specifically, something that's very interesting is that since his solo debut, there's been a huge increase in male soloist debuts in general who share characteristics that are similar to his performance style, which his performance style is very unique and specific to him, which is why you can pinpoint, oh, their style is like Taemin's. And I think that comes a lot from one of his biggest influences, which is Michael Jackson, which kind of earns him the nickname the Michael Jackson of K-pop as well. I remember on Reddit, I saw someone said Taemin coming out of SHINee is like Michael Jackson coming out of the Jackson 5, but on another level.
I can see that. That's a pretty good like reference there.
I know, right? I'm like, yeah, that is literally what this is. So similar to Michael Jackson, Taemin has been known as a once in a generational idol, which is another title I absolutely love because it's like, you know, in one generation you'll have the big names of art, and I definitely think he fits that. And Taemin himself has always thought of Michael Jackson as one of his idols and takes like inspiration from him. And even though he takes inspiration from them, he still has a very distinct style himself. It's very technical, very precise. And I think something that really confirmed this Michael Jackson comparison is when he released Danger, which was from his first album called Ace. That was in 2014. This was choreographed by Ian Westwood, who is a huge choreographer. He's done a lot of really big shows. Like you might not recognize his name, but if you look it up, you're gonna notice what he's worked on. This had like a lot of quick and jerky movements that were similar to Michael Jackson. And Taemin was like, I didn't mean to like copy him, like I didn't purposefully do this. This is just kind of how it turned out. But that comparison really quickly gave him that name of like the Michael Jackson of K-pop. Which like, can we just talk for a second how big of a title that is in general? Like the Michael Jackson of K-pop, like that's a little bit. I'd be like, well, that's
I'd be
scary.
Like intimidated by myself. Like, I'm like, those are
big shoes
to fill.
I mean, Taemin does fill those shoes. Have you seen those big clown shoes he's been wearing lately? I mean, he rocks it, but it's hilarious. Now, talking a little bit more about Danger. Danger comes from his first debut mini album called Ace, like I kind of mentioned previously. This was named Ace after his industry nickname, being the Ace of Aces. And it was also written and vocally backed by TVXQ's Chungmin, which is very interesting. I don't personally know TVXQ very well, but I know that they're very big and like transformational in K-pop as well. And something I absolutely love about this album is that he, first off, is very good friends with Kai from EXO. And he gave Kai his first ever gig as a solo act outside of EXO by choosing him to come on a B-side track called Pretty Boy.
Cute.
Before I go into Pretty Boy a little bit more, I found out that, because I knew Kai and Taemin were friends. Yeah. I did not realize that they were friends from their trainee days. That means they were friends at 10 and 11 years old. I was like, what? They're childhood friends. I was like, that just like gave me a whole new perspective on their friendship. But anyway, jumping back with Pretty Boy, this was a very important song and there's a reason I bring it up. One of the lines in this song that I absolutely love is they sing, "Why is being sensitive and prepared the opposite of being a man?" They're breaking masculine stereotypes. And this and the rest of his songs were on this album were honestly the beginning of a huge thing for Taemin. And I feel like this song is just a good representation of that. But it's his journey of self-discovery. And I know that it's been a very long and painful path for him, but he shows it a lot in his music. I have a very strong urge to protect Taemin and I have ever since the beginning, but I also admire him so much for the same reasons. He's been through a lot, and I just want to say this now. From here on out, this episode might have a little bit heavier themes and topics, but it's important, and it's who Taemin is, and it's why I love him, so let's get into it a little bit more. I feel like one of the most iconic releases Taemin ever had in his career, which is a very big statement, was his album Move, which was released in 2017. He used to be very insecure about his femininity, only to absolutely turn that around and use it to his advantage, which I absolutely love. Move was huge in the K-pop industry. It broke gender norm stereotypes and basically started a new age of like subtle, sensual K-pop.
Yeah.
It would, like, that is insane to me that he, like, pioneered this. But anyway, he also, like, popularized the trend of long hair in male K-pop idols, like, kind of feminine styles or extensions. And he also had a lot of androgynous fashion, used very heavy makeup, and especially since Move, they recognized him as a pioneer of genderless performance amongst male K-pop idols. And I feel like this entire, like, genderless and open to femininity in male K-pop idols was something that intrigued me in K-pop ever since the beginning. And Taemin puts this better than I could ever put it. He said that with Move, I wanted to go beyond what K-pop typically was perceived as. Regardless of the gender, I believe that everyone will be able to enjoy and listen to this. It's something different than what's normally coming out in K-pop. My aim was to find a middle ground, mixing both masculine and feminine movements into the choreography together. And you definitely see this. You have male and female dancers doing very complicated choreography, but it blurs that line between masculine and feminine roles. And this was a concept that Korean music did not have back then. And we recently did an episode on K-pop duality, and which we talk about this more, but like this is where it really started to become accepted. Yeah, like it's because of Taemin's Move that people were like, hey, this is actually kind of cool. Like we can do this, you know? I mean, if you listen to that episode, you know how much we love duality and what that means to the K-pop industry. Not only was the androgyny impactful, but the choreo itself was huge in Korea. It's a very like fluid choreography, and it honestly just proved to the industry that it doesn't have to be intense choreo to be impactful. It sparked a phenomenon called the Move disease after a performance of the song went absolutely viral in South Korea, and this showcases Taemin's power as a trendsetter again. They called it like the Move trend as well, but I like Move disease better. I think that's hilarious. Basically, in equivalent days, it would be like a viral TikTok trend if that happened. Yeah. Like we would be getting like dance challenges of Move if TikTok had existed at that time. And back then, there were a lot of dance covers by fans and celebrities. And to this day, you still see a lot of K-pop idols doing Move. But jumping back into this whole like being a leading figure in genderless fashion, androgyny, all of that, aside from like blurring the lines between like masculine and feminine stuff, and like dealing with this femininity his whole life and the backlash that came from it, the sexualization Taemin received throughout his career has also wildly influenced his music. And we really start to see this with his second full album with the song Thirsty, and in his first full album with the song literally titled Sexuality. And we will talk more about this theme, but first I feel like we need to talk about his first full album, which is another thing I absolutely adore about Taemin, going a little bit more into this duality that we've talked about. I think duality can be a little bit shallow sometimes, like it can be like sexy versus cute, you know, but I feel like for Taemin it's a lot deeper, and he describes it as almost like an inner battle with himself of like, who am I really? And I feel like that's been a lot of his life struggle and what a lot of his music focuses around, of who is he truly and how does he want to show himself to the world. And we start to see this with his music very early on in February of 2016 when he released his very first album called Press It. Press Your Number was actually co-produced by Bruno Mars. Had no idea. That's adorable. But no, I can't even get too deeply into the music video for this episode because it's way too much. It's very beautiful, very poetic, showcases these themes even deeper, but I really need to focus on a very, very specific teaser image that came from this era. The promotional picture blew my mind. I saw it very early on in my K-pop journey, and it was a huge introduction to his theme of duality and this complex personality that he has. It's a poster of him kissing himself, which right off the bat sounds very fan servicey, but it's also very deeply symbolic. So on one side, you have like this, quote, evil Taemin side, who's like dressed in red and he's got like this dark and dangerous vibe. And then on the other side, you have like a more innocent, like angel-like Taemin, and he seems almost captivated by this dark side of himself. Now, this alone is very important to understand as I'm explaining everything, because this kiss is showing his desire and maybe even acceptance for this like edgier side of himself. And I feel like this like combating sides of his personality is a very common theme we see throughout, like even in Move that we just talked about, it's that masculine versus feminine sides of himself. And later when we talk about Criminal, it's like his criminal side and his innocent side that are like battling against each other. We see it a lot. Now, I think this was the point, like we started to see these themes back with like Kai and Pretty Boy and all of the stuff in the Ace album, but this was the true starting point of his journey into his self-discovery, self-forgiveness, and identity as a whole. A huge part of Taemin's self-discovery and acceptance revolves around sexuality. He is very known for sensual songs, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, they are absolutely incredible. And I know you may be asking, why are we talking about sexuality? Like, yes, it's hot, but it's also so much more than that. For me personally, it also goes a lot deeper. This is a touchy subject for me. It's like hard for me to talk about, but I think it's very important to understand why Taemin means so much to me, and this helps explain it all. I think there are moments in your life that define who you are and like change you, and I've had quite a few of these moments in my life that have very heavily affected who I am. And Taemin uses his art in a way that really speaks to me about two very big things that were life-changing for me: sexuality and religion. I'm going to keep this as short and to the point as I possibly can, but let me preface by saying I grew up in Utah. So right off the bat, I'm sure you can understand a bit of the bubble that I grew up in. I have identified as part of the LGBT plus community since I was about 14 years old. And honestly, it wasn't taken very well by some of the people in my life that I needed acceptance from. And like as time went on, they got better about it and I did have support, but more so than these outside forces, I struggled with accepting myself for years. And honestly, I still do sometimes. I can't explain how hard it is to feel so much guilt and hatred for yourself, like for who you are as a person. And even further than my struggle with sexuality, which was already very heavy, I also really struggled with spirituality and religion. Again, I grew up in Utah, which probably explains enough as it is, but within a year or two of my life, I completely lost my religion. It may not sound like it's that deep, but that was one of the hardest things in my life, which is saying a lot. It's basically like losing your entire identity. Like quite literally the foundation of who you are and how you were raised is just like ripped away.
Yeah.
And like you have to rebuild yourself from nothing. Like you have to rediscover who you are. And Taemin's music and themes portray self-acceptance and identity in a way that feels absolutely healing to me. He also uses biblical references and imagery, which may seem strange that this is comforting to me, seeing as he is Catholic and I am not religious, but the way he uses religion in his themes speaks to me very deeply with that like personal heartache and religious trauma, and very specifically like the religious guilt that comes with that. But let's dive a little bit deeper into how Taemin expresses all of this. This is the beginning of what I lovingly call Taemin lore, coining this term. I hesitantly call it lore because this is genuinely just who he is and what he's experienced, but it kind of like revolves a theme, so it's kind of like lore. So yeah, first off, Taemin is incredibly skilled at having dual meaning in everything. You can interpret his music videos and his songs in a million different ways, and I think that's why I struggled so badly to put this episode together, because there is a million different ways you can take this. And I admire that so much about him, to be completely honest. Like, as an artist, I want to do that as well with my art. But keep that in mind as I'm explaining. This is what I am personally interpreting it as. So now comes Taemin's trilogy, or whatever you want to call it, because it's not even really a trilogy. I don't fully understand, but it's like a series of releases that have a lot of meanings. In some interpretations, it starts with Two Kids as a prequel and then moves to Criminal, followed by Idea, and for some, it finishes with like a sequel with Advice. They all have very beautiful and deep meanings. They have, again, like we said, so many possible explanations and interpretations. It could be about Taemin's career. It could be a very literal religious aspect. It can be about love. There's so many meanings that it can have, but I'm not going to focus on any of those today. Let's start with Want, which was released in February of 2019. Want was an absolute new career high for Taemin at this point in his life. Want is extremely captivating and addicting song. It's dark, it's inviting, it's beautiful, and it is just pure desire. It's hot. It's sensual. He is like the epitome of temptation. And it also has a lot of biblical references of like wanting more of what's considered sin, like this temptation. And you know it's bad, but you keep coming back. And I absolutely love how Taemin is so smug in this because he's like, he knows how much people lust for him. And he's like, yeah, I get it. I know you lust for me. Like, And you see that a lot in his choreography where he, again, mixes a lot of like feminine and masculine choreo. And like, I remember watching the music video the other day, and there was like this part towards the end where he goes from very like hard movements to like looking over his shoulder, like so feminine and like beautiful. And I'm like, everyone is simping over this man. This was also the first time, I believe, I could be wrong, where we get Taemin's Jesus pose, like the crucifixion pose. It can have a lot of meanings. Again, I personally kind of have decided that this is an acceptance of whatever's happening in said current music video, but I just love Want. It's him fully acknowledging that he is a temptation and he's using his sexuality to his advantage. It's like a huge power move. Next, we're going to go on to Never Gonna Dance Again Act 1, which was released September of 2020. This title track was Criminal. And again, very sensual and incredible song. I'm not going to go into the reasons why it's sensual. Just watch it and you'll be fully aware. I feel like I'm borderlining on explicit in this episode anyway in some cases, so we're going to leave it at that. But he is basically saying that like this temptation and desire could be something that's holding him back or even hurting him, but he like wants more of it. He's desiring it. I also love the idea that this song can show that music kind of became his enemy. It's something that like only brought him pain and suffering, and then later in Advice he realizes that music is almost like his savior. He incorporates the piano a lot, which I know is kind of fun because Yoongi also incorporated piano a lot into his like music. But Taemin learned piano in elementary school. It's been a big part of his life. So you see it in like little pieces here and there in his music, which I think is cute. We'll get to that a little bit more later. Then you move on to Never Gonna Dance Again Act 2, which was released literally like 2-3 months after the first act. And this is by far my favorite album by Taemin ever. It was actually my first ever K-pop album that I bought, which I am so proud. I'm like, that is something I will always be like, yep, Never Gonna Dance Again Act 2 was my first K-pop album. This title track is Idea. I love all of the songs in it, but Idea is what we're going to be focusing on. He's dressed in a very like religiously angsty way, and I was immediately intrigued because it almost felt like sacrilegious. And so I knew this album was going to draw me in immediately because of the concepts alone. It's like a battle with faith. Very quickly, Idea is about him being like stuck in this idea that people have of him and for him, and it's like consuming him. He doesn't need or want all of these ideas of who he should be and how he should act. He just wants to be himself. And the music video and the lyrics seem to be him like finally accepting that and accepting who he is and who he wants to be. Like just him, Taemin. And I was reading about like all of this and all of his imagery, and something clicked in my brain. I was reading an article and like something just flipped. And I realized, could all like these 3 songs that are kind of like a trilogy in a way, could he be talking to himself instead of like talking about his outer forces? I'll explain more in a minute. Hopefully this all makes sense, but I was shook to my core. It's like the struggles that he's having within. And so I did a bunch of researching, and after getting so much info, I rewatched the music videos and I felt like I was watching them for the very first time. So let's start with Want. This is the first music video, in my opinion, that we really see this interpretation in. It's this like darkness that's lingering in him, and he's finally accepted it. Like all of this lust and desire that we talked about, these voices that are bombarding him for years about like his struggles, and he's like starting to accept that this darkness might be who he is. And like I said before, he's taking these negative things and flipping them to his advantage. So if we were to use imagery here, it's like you're like crying and things are happening and people are saying and doing things and they're deciding who you can and can't be. And then this like little devil on your shoulder is whispering in your ear, and it's like, why don't you just give in to them then? Like, make them see what they are asking of you so badly. And so this song is all about temptation, Taemin being the literal definition of it. And at one point he's kind of saying, like, you're all going to hell for falling for this temptation. Or is he himself going to hell for showcasing this side of himself? And that's the whole other look at this, and the one I'll be speaking of from now on is like this battle with his own inner darkness. Is he himself dooming himself for pushing this part of him? And once he has a piece of this darkness that he talks about and want, it's like he can't stop. Like something inside him wants to sin, essentially, or wants to continue down this path. And like at one point in the lyrics, he talks about, like, he says, open your eyes, what do you want? I'll make you realize what you never knew. I'll leave you thirsting for more. It's like this darkness is telling him to, like, stop fighting against me, like open your eyes and have a little taste, and then you'll be wanting to come back for more. And I was so shook over the realization that he could be talking to himself as this alter ego, like all the way back from the Press It album, where he's like in that poster looking and admiring his darker self. We're seeing that again here of like he's wanting that. So then moving on to Criminal, this is when Taemin is like speaking to the darkness. He's saying he knows it's bad for him. He's trying to abandon it. He's like quite literally tied up in it. And he talks about how he's like brainwashed because of it. But he doesn't necessarily hate that it's happening. At one point, like the lyrics are talking about a criminal or like this darkness who hurts me. It's okay, you soothe me just to torture me again. And as painful as much as I can't breathe, but also magnificent. So elegant, a criminal who destroys me. He's like fighting against it, but he's also acknowledging that he doesn't dislike it. And in fact, this darkness is bringing him something that only it can unlock. Like he would not have been able to reach these things if he didn't allow
without
himself.
that side of himself, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like, is this darkness really a bad thing? Like, it's kind of helping me out here. And this song gradually leads him to becoming more and more accepting of the darkness inside him. He's saying that he can't deny it, and it was his destiny from the beginning. And he isn't just tempted by this darkness, but maybe it was in him all along, and he was feeding into it in the first place. Like, all of this negativity is already inside him, so he might as well just let it take over. And visually, there's this statue in this music video that shows figures inspired by Martin Desjardins' 4 captives, representing 4 different reactions to captivity. So you've got like hope, revolt, resignation, and grief. And you see Taemin in the music video literally becoming a part of this statue in his signature Jesus pose. So it's like him becoming part of this captive statue in such a beautiful artistic way. Like, that makes my art brain so happy. But then the song slows down even more, and he says that super iconic line, "Destroy me more." The chorus at this point is so powerful, and it's like he is fully accepting it. He says, "Criminal or darkness who hurts me, it's okay you soothe me just to torture me again." It's like, it's a whole new meaning, but the lyrics didn't change. It's like he's saying the same things, but it means a completely different thing. And then he ends with, "I don't want to get away, destroy me completely." So this persona, this innocence that he used to be, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't him. And he wants to be himself, even though it can hurt him sometimes. And he's tired of telling himself that it's okay to settle for something less. Like, this darkness he's realizing will bring him to new heights, and it is bringing him to new heights. Now, throughout this time, I've been saying the word darkness. I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing. It's just like another side of him, right? But it's just like easier to conceptualize with using that. Then we move on to Idea, where he has decided to completely accept the darkness. He's like, "Darkness, you are my savior, but you are killing me." It's this idea that accepting the darkness, it got me there. It took me to the heights I wanted, but maybe I'm deciding now it's not fully me. And like, it's kind of eating at him. Of he's like, wait, maybe I like took this a little too far.
Like the consequences of giving into it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, he like fully accepts that this darkness was his idea, and it was beautiful in a way. Like, yes, it's not fully him, but he like doesn't want to hide it. Like, it's still a part of him. And this is where a lot of his duality really starts to show. And there's like even a clip in the music video where you pause on the lyrics where it talks about the absolute value you, and it's a mirrored shot of Taemin. Like, you see 2 images of him, and so it's quite literally like referencing this dual side of him. He values both sides. And in the end of this music video, you can see him basically destroying the light and the in-between. If you want to reference it, it's like heaven and limbo and hell kind of a thing. You see like lightning and red flashing in this heaven scenario and all of these lights, and he's being alone and really distracted in this limbo area. And he's just realizing that like all of these aspects, this is the real me. He's up in this heaven scenario and the lights are flashing and he's dancing in the flames of hell. And he's like, all of these parts are me. Like I can be all of these and more. And then, you know, he ends the song with the night that I cut you out, this idea that I can only be one version of me is when I finally open my eyes. Like I've gotten rid of that idea. And then of course he ends with his iconic Jesus pose. Then he takes his own advice and listens to himself and becomes freed, which is where Advice comes to play in, which was released in May of 2021. Advice is one of the best songs and music videos ever released in history. Period. I'm definitely not biased here, but like it was literally so ahead of its time. I did a TikTok edit recently. I was saying basically like soloists are really popping off lately because they are. And I was like, I realized a theme like in the music and the sound and the concepts, and I put them all together. And then I was like, and then a year ago, Taemin released Advice, and it's that same thing. So I'm like, a year ago he was doing what everyone's doing now. But several of Taemin's songs and albums have been in the Billboard's top charts, but Advice reached number 1 on iTunes, charting in 41 different countries. It conquered charts. A little sidetrack there, but getting into this lore of sorts that I kind of discovered here. This is quite literally the blending of the dark and light side that he wants. Like you can see it in his outfit. It is half black and half white. And it's basically a showcase of he just doesn't care anymore. Like the first lines that he says in that is, no matter what anyone says, I'm gonna do it my way. And like the song and the visuals, he's portraying all of these like bad influences and negativity and not being able to reach his ideal self anymore. Like he's not the victim to other people's ideals. Like he's dropping all of these expectations and who he said he should be, which I find interesting. We're going a little bit more into lyrics again here, but he talks about this voice that's telling me to be these things. It's a losing game. And the voice is telling him, be more creative, but do it in like a sharper or a better way. And Taemin responds with, I destroy the torso you were chasing after. I'm destroying the main part of the body, the basis of everything you were going after. Like, you already know this, but I'm getting rid of this advice quote that you're trying to get me to do and tell me who to be. And the more you try and trap me in this, I'm gonna lose my mind. Like, I'm going off the rails. So if you want to see the end, push me more. And you know, he's taking his own advice. You're never gonna take away who I am. I've locked it in. You'll never get the key to my lock. Yeah. And then boom, Jesus pose.
And there's still like a lot of imagery in that one with like, in the very beginning scene where he has like all the black on him, there's really like thorns drawn on him, like the paint on them. The like hat that he's wearing has thorns on it. His bomber jacket in a different scene has thorns all over it. So there's still very much that imagery in there. Yeah,
absolutely. And I feel like that's almost like protective in a way too. If he's like, don't touch me anymore. Like we're done. I'm my own person now. Advice as a whole, again, I do not understand Korean, but I feel this song so deeply. This anger of, I'm not gonna be who you want me to be anymore. I'm taking my own advice. I'm being who I want to be, who I truly am. And so I think it's so beautiful, like kind of what you just talked about with his different concepts. We see in this music video everyone that he has ever been throughout the years. So you see the images, those beautiful, stunning images of the piano, and he's alone. And that's his childhood of his, like, you know, this is his piano, his innocence, that time of his life. And then you see him in those black masks and all of the scarring. That's the darkness in him that he dealt with in all those music videos we talked about. That's the dark side that he was dealing with. And then you get the crop top and the red. That's his femininity and all the sexuality that he was dealing with. And you're getting all of these beautiful aspects of Taemin and who he's been throughout all of these years, all put into this music video of, he's like, this is all me. And it's showing that, like, this music, his entire artist career, even though it's been hard, it's all been him all along, and like, this is what he lives for. Now, this is in no way all of his music videos or songs. I cannot possibly go through every release. I would love to. And eventually, I think doing a discography deep dive on Taemin would be absolutely amazing. Everything he releases is so stunning, so I would love to. but I cannot wait for his next solo works, because basically right after Advice, he dipped. A quick side note here, I was introduced to Taemin in August of 2021. That means I got into Taemin when he was already enlisted. So I have considered Taemin my ult bias throughout his entire military experience. Like, he wasn't even here. And I was like, yep, that's my ult. But anyway, jumping back, he enlisted in May of 2021. He released Advice in May of 2021. So he literally released this and a week later was gone. Now, 4 months before his enlistment, Taemin had 5 comebacks, a drama OST, SHINee, and a solo concert, and who knows what else more. He quite literally has been overworked his entire career. And I know that he was extremely worried about going into the military. There was like a live stream that he did that honestly broke my heart. He was like talking about how nervous he was because he has barely had a break ever since debuting at 14. Like, this was the longest time off he was going to have since being a trainee in 2005. And later on in his military enlistment, January of 2022, he actually was a public service worker due to his anxiety. But finally, on April 4th of 2023, he returned from his service literally almost 2 years after he enlisted. And he spoke to Teen Vogue, which was his first interview once he came back from the military, saying that it was difficult and painful and he felt such longing, but now he feels like he's learned how to live, which I am incredibly happy for because I can't even imagine not having a break for 15 years.
Oh, no.
Also, little side note, but I think it's really cute. Taemin is one of the only K-pop artists to have literally the entirety of his company give him personal send-off messages for his military enlistment. Like the SM founder, Lee Taemin, the current label CEOs, the head producer, Yoo Youngjin, performance directors, managers, dancers, production teams, trainers, etc. all like personally sent him off.
Cute.
He is K-pop's baby. I love it. There's a million things that could add to why I love him. And I know you said something very similar in your Yoongi episode because it's so true. It's like Taemin's funny lives and his brutal sarcasm, his famous cat, and his deep fear of bugs. Like, it's hard not to love Taemin for all of the little things, which is why when you do dive in deeper, I couldn't help but call him my ult. And like, as cheesy as this sounds, I think my soul quite literally chose him. And there's obviously a lot more in my life than what I've mentioned that makes me feel so comforted by him. But overall, Taemin just encourages you to know these different parts of yourself, and he says it's okay to not know who you are. Keep growing, changing, and you can be so many different versions of yourself. So in conclusion, to wrap this up, I've been talking so much, and I appreciate you coming to my spill.
Your TED Talk, Taemin Talk.
Yes, my Taemin Talk.
Taemin Talk.
I love it. I think Taemin is a constant force to be reckoned with. He is simultaneously one of the most loved and hated idols because he is doing what no one has dared to do, and he does it unapologetically. You're lusting for me? Now you can't get enough. Say I'm too feminine, I define androgyny. Call me a bad singer, and I will top the charts. Call me a bad dancer, and I will become the Michael Jackson of K-pop. My sexuality is too much? Here's a poster of me kissing myself. I am desire, I'm obsession, I'm success. I will be everything you have forced me to be. I am all the good, all the bad at once. I am defining a new world and the future as the king of K-pop. Scene. Now, as always, you can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at The Lunapod, and on Instagram at The Luna Podcast for up-to-date information on episode releases and behind-the-scenes fun. We post all sorts of content, so definitely make sure to follow us and check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye!
Bye.